Fantasy Focus Football is presented by Geico. Insurance can be hard. That's why Geico makes it easy with 24/7 claim service and on-the-go policy info in the app. It's easy to Geico. It's Monday, November 27th. It's our Week 12 wrap-up show. Of course, one game left to be played tonight. On ESPN, it's the Bears and the Vikings. Field Yates and Mike Clay. Just the two of us today, Michael.
Yeah, you're so far away.
I know.
You're so far away.
This is like our Titanic scene right here, right? I won't let go. Daniel Dot back tomorrow, but the two of us holding it down today. Mike, we have just 2 more full weeks until the fantasy football playoffs.
So fast.
In some ways, that makes you think like, wow, the season goes by so fast. It's also a reminder we still have quite a bit of football left to go, unless you're Frank Reich. As this morning, we got news that the Carolina Panthers have fired their head coach, Frank Reich, 11 games into his tenure, makes him the second shortest tenured coach in NFL history, unless you include coaches like Bill Belichick, who was with the Jets for 3 days, and coaches who didn't even make it to the start of the regular season. And Frank Reich is now the first coach since at least the 1970 merger to be fired during the season in back-to-back years. This is not NFL Live, but let's talk about what this might mean for fantasy, if anything at all.
Yeah, well, it's funny because we had this conversation, I believe, yesterday on Fantasy Football Now, which is, we were talking about the Steelers with Matt Canada being fired, which is, it doesn't matter if the players aren't good enough, right? Specifically at the quarterback position. Yeah. And now, granted, yesterday the Steelers did make a leap forward. Still uncertain how much of that was Kenny Pickett, how good of a player he is, but same kind of thing applies here. Is Bryce Young the real deal? Right. Is he a guy that's going to catch up to C.J. Stroud and even Anthony Richardson when we saw him earlier this season? Or is he another on a long list of first-round busts? I mean, maybe we'll see some glimpses of a step forward in the next month or so. I think that's what Tepper's trying to find out here. If, you change play callers, get Reich out of there, does he improve?
Yeah.
We'll see. I'm not so sure yet, but again, often... I'll just say, I want to say this because I don't want to feel like I'm just calling Bryce Young a bust. When a rookie quarterback has a really good season, usually that's a good sign. It means they're going to be good. When a rookie quarterback has a bad rookie season, you usually just throw it away. It doesn't really matter. We've seen that time and time again. So I think that's what they're thinking here is Reich's not the future. Let's take a look at him without Reich and see if he looks a little better. Yeah,
pretty amazing. I mean, just amazing just to think that a coach 11 games into a tenure. Urban Meyer got 13 games. Like Frank Reich couldn't even last as long as Urban Meyer or Nathaniel Hackett have in recent years. So Frank Reich is gone. I don't think there's any fantasy actionable content, at least from my perspective here. There's only one player on the Panthers that you would consider starting. That's Adam Thielen. And even he has come back down to earth over the past month or so, but after a crazy stretch of like 10 or 11 catches every single game, it felt like.
Yeah, maybe it'll be, I don't know if he's on like Devonta Adams level. They made the coaching change. We're like, all right, new plan should just be throw it to Adams all the time. Yeah. And they did that. Yeah. So I don't know. Does Thielen get that treatment? The targets have fallen off. He was really good earlier this year.
He was. So more on this Panther story. Again, all over ESPN today. I'm sure NFL Live, SportsCenter, you name it, we'll be talking about it. But let's dive into the fantasy stuff because if you're here, that's what you care about the most. And we had, of course, 3 games on Thanksgiving, a 4th on Black Friday. Good holiday for you, by the way?
Yeah, it was a good holiday. Lots of turkey. And mostly, are we going to get into the Eagles? Are we going to talk about the Eagles at some point?
Wow, maybe we will, Mike, at some point. But yes, you are sporting your very proud Eagles gear.
Kelly Green.
10-1.
Kelly Green wins today.
10-1. Did you see this? Do you know this? That the last 4 teams to start 10-1 in back-to-back seasons in that second season have made it to the championship game, whether that's the Super Bowl or the NFL championship. So good days ahead for your Eagles.
My preseason pick was Eagles over Dolphins, so trending the right direction.
Good,
Eagles looking good, Dolphins hit or miss. We'll see. It might depend where the playoff games are for Miami.
Of late, not so hit or miss. Dak Prescott, who has been on fire, Mike. Another 30-plus point effort for Dak. 331 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns. We were having this conversation yesterday during breaks on Fantasy Football Now. Is he the fantasy, like the most valuable player in fantasy football right at this present moment? I'm not saying for the season, but like if you could have one guy in your lineup, there's very few that you would prefer over Dak Prescott.
Yeah, very few. I don't know if I go that far just because he's a quarterback. You'd have to really be at the extreme to be in that conversation.
He's
and
close,
I think Josh Allen still has a pretty nice edge over QB2.
Everybody.
Is a pretty big edge at quarterback. But you're right. I mean, his last 6 finishes, 1st, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, 15th, and he's 3rd pending Monday Night Football this week. 20 touchdowns during those 6 games. And you know what's incredible about this is his first month and a half, not good at all.
Yeah.
He had like no top 15 finishes. and it's completely flipped. So credit to that coaching staff for getting him going after a really poor start to the season.
Yeah, I had a 10-team league that I had Kirk Cousins as my initial starter, and I grabbed Dak at one point just as a backup quarterback.
Yeah, he was on
and
waivers.
it's like my team has gotten dramatically better since that time. He's been unbelievable, and that has not necessarily been because the running game has been dominating as much, Mike, but we are seeing some signs of life from Tony Pollard. Actually, last note on Dak before we get any further. His schedule going forward, not tough.
No, they're at home against Seattle this week.
They play Seattle on Thursday night, and then they do have a couple of difficult games in terms of quality of opponent, right? They still play Kansas City at some point. They play your Eagles one more time. But this is a schedule that for fantasy purposes, I think Dak Prescott can continue to be, like, at worst, a top 5 quarterback the rest of the season.
Lineup lock for sure.
He has been outstanding, and Tony Pollard kind of finding his groove as well. Mike, are you buying or selling that Tony Pollard has become the player we hope for coming into the season?
I'm buying. I mean, what did we say about a month ago? We said, would you be shocked if about a month from now we're like, yeah, Tony Pollard scored in a bunch of games. He scored like 5 touchdowns in 4 games.
Yeah.
He's, the production's finally caught up with the volume. And sure enough, we're starting that. We'll see if it continues, but we are starting that over the last 2 weeks. 16 plus touches, 80 plus yards, and a touchdown in 2 straight. Has 12 plus carries and 5 plus targets in both of those games. Will he do it again this week? Well, they're at home against Seattle, the 4th most fantasy points allowed to running backs this season. So a terrific matchup. Yes, I expect him to keep it going, and I'll probably rank him as a fringe RB top 5 running back this week.
22.3 fantasy points for Tony Pollard. Came in a day, by the way, in which Rico Dowdle scored a touchdown on a screen pass as well. And that was early in the game, but Pollard really dominated both the touches and the snaps before the backups came in. He played nearly 80% of the snaps. And he had 19 touches, his most in the game since week 6, Mike.
Yeah,
so he has been very busy for the Cowboys of late. Again,
and it's unreal. They just continue to either get blown out or mostly blow teams out.
Yeah,
they're all one-sided games. You just don't see game after game after game decided by 20-plus points, and that's been the trend for them all year.
First game of the day was the Packers going to Detroit and beating the bag out of the Lions. They were terrific, and that in part includes Jordan Love, who had over 26 fantasy points, going to be a top 5 quarterback for the week, most likely, and he now has 20-plus fantasy points in back-to-back games. Is this something that you think has sustainability?
I don't, and the reason is because he started the season this way and disappeared for a long time. In fact, he's QB 5 this week. Yep. He was 9th or lower 7 straight weeks. There was even 2 weeks ago he had the 20-point game. He was still 9th in scoring at quarterback because he had a lot of that's general. Some weeks that's not going to cut it. 3 passing touchdowns this past week. His first over 2 since week 2. Yeah. So I'm not buying it yet. He's been hit or miss with rushing production as well.
Okay, only thing that I'll say here is, I was hard on Jordan Love coming out of the gates, where he had, I think, 6 of his first 29 completions were passing touchdowns. I was like, this is fluky, right? This is going to eventually come back down to earth. And by the way, it came back down to earth in a dramatic way. What I will say, though, is the improvement that I've seen from Jordan Love is real. He looks like he is becoming the version that the Packers thought they had over the past few years when they first drafted him and then eventually moved on from Aaron Rodgers. There were other reasons for that as well, but you can start to see how this offense can become a very good one going forward, in large part because of the improvement of Jordan Love. We have 2 weeks left with buys. And the teams that are on bye in week 14 are the Commanders and the Cardinals. If you have Kyler as your quarterback, you probably already had somebody you were riding with prior to Kyler, so you may already have your replacement there. Sam Howell, probably not many people's starters in a 10-team league. So week 13 might be somewhere where you can tap into Jordan Love's value. Pulse, as you look at me for something here?
I was just going to say, looking at his schedule, he's got 5 games with 20-plus fantasy points. It was against the Bears, who allow the 6th most points, the Falcons, who allow the 8th most points, the Lions, who allow the 7th most points, the Chargers, who allow the 3rd most points. So it could be a matchup-dependent play.
And I agree. I agree with that. He's a streamer. He's still, I would say, generally, we're going to rank him as a good QB2. When the matchup's right, we bump him up a few spots, and you could stream him. That's not the case this week. They're playing the Chiefs. Chiefs, 8th fewest fantasy points to quarterback so far this season. So no, I would not go back to that well this week.
Okay, so probably not going to crack our top 10, but just like I think the signs of improvement are also important to notice, and that also includes Jayden Reed, Mike, who might be one of the more intriguing waiver wire pickups of the week. What say you?
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going to go next. Is that's one thing I think when we were kind of critical of Love, because we were so fixated on like it was a fluky start to the season that like the skill guys around him are one of the youngest we've ever seen since we've been doing this job. It was all first and second year players. So it makes sense that they would get better and the chemistry would get better and he would get better over the year. And we are seeing that, to your point. And that applies to Jayden Reed as well. 5+ touches, 50+ yards, and exactly 1 touchdown in 3 straight games, at least 15 fantasy points in all of those games. However, 1 top 30 week prior to this streak that he just got going. And what we're seeing from Green Bay here is we're not going to focus on one player. We're going to spread it around, and that has hurt Christian Watson. It's helped Jayden Reed to some extent, but they're getting Romeo Doubs involved. It did help that Dontavian Wicks, who was playing a bigger role, was out this week. Luke Musgrave's on IR, and with Musgrave on IR, maybe that does work out well for Reed to get touches. He's also getting carries here as well.
Curtis Samuel like right now, right?
Yeah, very much so. I think that's the perfect comp for him. So I think he's a flex option. Tougher matchup this week against the Chiefs, but I would say flex.
Passes the eye test in a serious way. I use that term probably too much on this show, but this guy can play. Second round pick. They drafted him for a reason, around number 50 overall. So he's definitely got some potential in this offense. And I mentioned how Jordan Love is improving. Jayden Reed, and just like this entire offense, like starting to gel as you would expect for the youngest team in the NFL. And oh, by the way, Matt LaFleur kind of finding his rhythm as a play caller with this team too.
He's going to see a lot of Trent McDuffie this week, so not ideal.
Yeah. Last one here, Mike, is the Dolphins win on Black Friday, and Raheem Mostert ends up with over 21 fantasy points. But in some ways, might there be a little bit of fool's gold to what we saw on Friday afternoon?
Yeah, I think so. I think the main reason is he has 20+ carries in 2 straight games. He hasn't done that all year. When Devon Etienne comes back, which we expect him back this week, that's not going to happen. He's not going to get to 20 carries. He might have 10. He might have 9, might have 8. Jeff Wilson played pretty well. Yeah. And this could be a 3-man backfield with Etienne leading the way. Also, in his last 5 games, Raheem Mostert has 13 yards on 4 targets.
There it is, baby. Yep. 13,
not going to cut it. I mean, he might not even be startable in a week or two.
We have the we have the fantasy trade deadline on Wednesday of this week. Is there a chance that Raheem Mostert is like the ultimate sell high candidate? Now, it'd have to be for a great package, because like you say sell high so often in fantasy, and then someone's like, all right, fine, I'll give you Alexander Madison. You're like, no. Like, I want somebody who's like actually really good, but Raheem Mostert might be one of the most compelling potential sell high candidates because of the fact that there is a real chance that this week when they play the Commanders, it's a 3-man committee for the final 6 weeks of the regular season.
Yeah, just got to focus in on that number, which says he's 5th in fantasy points per game. Is he second? Is he still second overall in total points? Like he's up. Man. He's certainly top 5. So if you could take advantage of that number and someone buys into that, you have to try. I mean, you have to at least put some effort out there, because I'd be really nervous during the fantasy playoffs, barring an Etienne setback, that he's not going to be more than a flex of that. Yeah,
we'll jam this in here to wrap up this first segment, which is that the 49ers showed us why they're the 49ers on Thursday night, right? Brandon Ayuk has 2 catches. Yeah. Now, one of them goes for a touchdown, so he still manages 13 fantasy points. Debo was awesome on Thursday. He looked terrific. He was great. Had a monster night. 7 catches, 79 yards, plus a touchdown as well. Meanwhile, George Kittle, who had been the hottest tight end, like not named, I don't know, Trey McBride or something, has a total dud.
Sure did. Yeah.
So if you're not in Christian McCaffrey, you can't trust these guys totally, implicitly, 100%. You just can't.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, Ayuk is the ultimate 49er.
Yes.
To your point, he just really is. 6 or fewer targets, 4 of his last 5 games, but he's a touchdown in 3 straight after he had 0 in his 7 prior games. 1 top 20 finish in his last 7 games, but a top 36 score in 8 straight games. So he's actually had a weird high floor, but how he's doing it is all over the map. It's just bizarre production from this offense as usual.
Yeah, and by the way, maybe Brock Purdy is a Niner as well, because he had like less than 11 fantasy points on that night.
I mean, we've been ranking him now as like a mid to back end QB1 most weeks. As long as the matchup isn't terrible, I think he's startable.
Yeah, this offense is really good. This team is really, really good, but just a very 49ers night in a nutshell there against the Seahawks. But the 49ers win, so Stephania's is happy. They are in first place and in control of that division. More thoughts in just a moment, including the Jaguars, as we return here on Fantasy Focus. Before we get there, though, we have some thoughts from our friends first over at Geico, Mike. And whether it's home, auto, prize sports memorabilia, whatever it is you need to protect, Geico can help get you covered. And with the award-winning Geico mobile app, you can get 24/7 claim support and on-the-go policy access. It's easy to Geico. Go to geico.com today.
No matter what team you're rooting for, there's one thing we can all agree on. Football season brings us together. A connection like that deserves to be celebrated with a light beer that's just as great. And at just 96 calories a can, Miller Lite is the only light beer you want to celebrate with all season long. Because with a Miller Lite in your hand, football doesn't just taste great, it tastes like Miller time. From kickoff to the final whistle, You can't go wrong with Miller Lite in your hand. It's the only light beer with a taste worthy of our natural obsession. Because what's the point of having a beer if it doesn't taste like, well, beer? It's got only 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12-ounce serving with a smooth taste and a crisp, clean finish. You get the taste you crave without the calories. So this season, crack open a light beer that hits your taste buds so hard, you feel it in your heart. Make it Miller time all season long. Get Miller Lite delivered right to your door. Visit MillerLite.com/FFF, or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces.
All right, back here on Fantasy Focus, Field Yates and Mike Clay recapping Week 12, and we start in Jacksonville. Got a huge win, perhaps enough to put them in the driver's seat in the AFC South over the Houston Texans, who try to make it interesting at the end. Mike, Trevor Lawrence, though, has found his groove. Back-to-back games with over 24 fantasy points. You seem a bit unconvinced, Michael.
It feels a little fluky to me. You know
Tell
why?
me more. Why?
He has 3 rushing touchdowns in those 2 games.
I got a stat for you in a second. You'll love this.
He has 17 rushing yards during that span.
Crazy,
so he stole a few goal line touchdowns. But it feels a little fluky. He has 12 passing touchdowns in 11 games. Yep. He was QB1 in fantasy points last week. He's 6th this week pending. This was actually before Sunday Night Football, and I wrote this up. His best weekly finish prior to week 11 was 8th, and that was in week 1. And his 2 top 10 weeks before that were both against the Colts. So it's a good sign. At least it makes you feel a little better starting him, but the rushing touchdowns feel fluky. I need more passing touchdowns. I need more of those if he's going to sustain as a QB1.
I love a quirky stat as much as the next guy. I feel like that's the Kyle Soppe in me. Love you, Kyle. We miss you daily. But how about this one? Trevor Lawrence is the 7th quarterback in NFL history with 600 or more passing yards, 3 or more passing touchdowns, and 3 or more rushing touchdowns in a 2-game span.
Okay. Yeah, that sound. You know me though. You know how my brain works when I hear that. Unsustainable.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
Exactly.
So the one thing that I did say about Trevor Lawrence though last week, and I'm going to apply this logic to Patrick Mahomes after a big game yesterday, is when you have a player with this much talent around him as well, is that like the confidence boost can happen in just one game, right? And you're hoping like, hey, there's a big performance last week. Flip that switch for Trevor and allow him to be the version of himself that we have seen even sporadically throughout his career. Like we know he has big games in him. We've now got 2 in a row. The Jaguars play next Monday night on ESPN, of course, against the Cincinnati Bengals. I think Trevor will hover around like QB 10 to 12 this week.
Yeah, maybe even a little bit higher than that. Look, I was being
16
picky.
on a bye as well.
I was being a little picky. He's still a back end. I would say a back end QB1 with 6 teams on a bye. Yeah.
Yep. Kind of like. Just tell me, like we just talked about him, like confidence-wise. I'm not talking about like how they get the job done. Do you have about as much confidence in Trevor Lawrence as you do Brock Purdy in a given week?
I think they're very close.
Okay.
I think they'll flip around based on the matchup. They're very close. Yeah. Right. I mean, Purdy's done a little bit with his legs. Lawrence, again, he has the touchdowns, but not the rushing yardage the past couple of weeks. And Purdy, same kind of thing. He had a couple of rushing touchdowns. Occasionally has a decent run, but they're very similar in that regard. It also helps that Trevor Lawrence now has Jerry Rice at wide receiver, a.k.a. Calvin Ridley with Zay Jones, Kevin Pulsifer. Tell me more about what your theory. I know you have a theory here, Pulse, about why Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones are interconnected in some way, shape, or form.
So this is something I started noticing like week 5, week 6. After Zay missed a couple games, came back week 5, and Ridley had that big game. Yep. In the 4 games that Ridley has played with Zay Jones, 24.4 fantasy points per game, over 100 yards per game, and 4 of his 5 touchdowns in just that small sample. Now, it could just be like, you could say it's fluky, you could say it's just a little bit here and there, but I found this quote from last month in the middle of Ridley's really bad stretch. Press Taylor, the Jaguars offensive coordinator, said, Ridley gets certain looks where teams are going to play a shell more willing to cloud to his side one way or the other, more willing to bracket coverage to his side. We want to do the right thing and just go where we're supposed to go with the football based on whatever they're allowing us.
Okay. So, and by the way, Dan Graziano talked to Christian Kirk before their game this week, and Christian Kirk talked about how like things are just sort of how they are supposed to be with Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones and Christian Kirk on the field. Here's the thing. I don't know if it's a thing or not, Mike, but I just love that there are 2 sides of this argument on the internet right now. And there are those people who refuse to accept that Zay Jones has anything to do with Calvin Ridley's success. And then there are those who are totally convinced that Calvin Ridley's success is tied to Zay Jones. Do you have a strong take on this one way or the other?
I don't have a super strong take. I mean, it all makes sense. The one thing I would say, though, is if Zay Jones gets hurt again, what Jacksonville needs to do. Okay, so his direct backup now is Tim Jones. So just lose the letter off there, so people just see Jones.
Right.
They're like, I must be Zay Jones.
Right.
We have to cover him. We have to put some guys on him, and that'll leave Ridley open.
Tim Jones isn't Tim Jones like 6'6"?
I don't know.
A little taller than Zay, but still, whatever. They have the same last name.
We'll figure it out.
Like, I tell you what, for like 2 years there, at least last year, when they allowed single-digit numbers, I thought Alexander Madison was Dalvin Cook every time he was on the field. It was impossible to tell the two apart.
To maybe slap a sticker of a Z on his shirt.
That works.
Tim Jones is 6'1", 200. Zay Jones is 6'2", 200.
I'm confusing Matt Jones. I'm thinking of a different Tim Jones then. That did not work out well for me.
Matt Jones? Are we thinking of Matt Jones?
No, Matt Jones. I'm not confusing him for Tim Jones. I do remember Matt Jones, though. Travis Etienne, quiet day, though, Mike. Do you think there's anything to be said about Trevor Lawrence's rushing touchdowns? Like, is that what is stealing Travis Etienne's value of late, or is there more to it?
Yeah, a little bit. He does have 0 touchdowns in his last 3 games, but he did bounce back in the volume department, 24 touches in this game at 86 yards. And he did have some opportunities near the goal line. It's just that's the high variance nature of football. Had he stumbled into the end zone, it wouldn't even be a conversation. So not worried about Etienne. Also, how about this? Matched a career high with 6 targets in this game.
You like that?
As well. So that's helpful. As long as he keeps getting the bulk of the carries and most of the passing down work, 4, 5, 6, 7 targets, we'll be happy.
Defenses are on the sense now of Trevor Lawrence running near the goal line. So Etienne's going to score a touchdown on Monday night.
You're right. You calling it
a goal line touchdown.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Save that take for next Tuesday's show, wrapping up Monday Night Football. Last part of this game, Mike, is the Texans. Again, this is a very gritty effort from them. And CJ Stroud is awesome. CJ Stroud now has overtaken Patrick Mahomes since our board bet began. I think he has him by like 8 points. He was unbelievable. He now has 300-plus passing yards in 6 games this season, 2 shy of the NFL record for a rookie, and 4 straight in a row. But most importantly, Mike, was he had 47 rushing yards and a touchdown yesterday. That was the most important part of what we saw, I thought, for fantasy purposes.
Yeah, that'll move his stock up for sure, helps his fantasy floor and his ceiling for sure. Career highs in carries and rushing yards in that game, so it wasn't just like one fluke run. It was 6 carries in that game. Also has a rushing touchdown in 3 of his last 5 games, so that's not out of nowhere as well. Yeah. So, and he's, to your point, 300-plus passing yards in 4 straight. So he's adding value with his legs and his arm now. The sky's the limit if he keeps running. He's the real deal. I mean, we knew that a month or so ago, but man, now he's adding another element to his game.
What do you got, Pulse?
So those first 2 touchdowns that he had a couple of weeks ago when we said those were fluky, kind of like scrambling, just finding the end zone. Yeah. This touchdown yesterday was on a bootleg. They designed that run for him, and if that's what they're going to start including, then I might be willing to change sides on that board bet.
Well, we can't change sides on board bets. We have to keep them as they were.
I might be willing to admit I was wrong on the board bet.
There you go. But importantly, as we just talked about the Packers, young team, you figure out more of what you can do from the start to the end of the season. Same thing with the Texans, right? Mm-hmm. While he is prodigious and absolutely incredible and not playing anything like a rookie, he is still a rookie in terms of experience, and they are finding out things they can do with CJ Stroud by the week. And he's also got a stud rookie wide receiver.
How good is Tank Dell?
He's unbelievable. The crazy part about Tank Dell, by the way, is 2 things. This day could have been a whole lot bigger for Tank Dell. He had a 5 for 50 with the touchdown line. He had a 70-yard catch, Mike, that was exclusively air yards. Like, he caught the ball and was tackled.
In coverage. I mean, it was a great catch.
Unbelievable catch. Unbelievable throw. It was called back because Tank Dell actually illegally motioned on the play.
Yeah, he moved slightly forward, right? That was the penalty there.
So
people were really mad about that.
Yeah, they were. And it was his penalty, but his incredible catch. So there are players who are big that play small. I hate that I keep saying this about this player, but I think Quentin Johnson is unfortunately one of those guys. Huge player that better for Yak than he is like go up there and get it. Yeah. Tank Dell is small and plays huge.
I agree.
He's 5'8".
Yeah, I mean, that catch you're talking about, I mean, yes, he moved a little forward at the line. It was his penalty, but that doesn't take away from what was an incredible catch in coverage. I mean, he looked really good. Touchdown in 4 straight games, 7+ targets and 6+ touches in all 4 of those games. He now has at least 17 fantasy points in 6 of his 8 full games. He's been money in the bank so far this season. They do draw Denver this week. I don't think he'll be shadowed,
right?
I don't think Surtain will shadow in this one. I think he'll just play sides. They'll move him around a lot, but not specifically on one player. You'll see him a little bit.
Fun game.
Denver has been really good against the pass. Actually, 5th fewest fantasy points to receivers this season. So this is a tougher matchup, but I mean, he's been so good. You're playing him.
Okay, so a little bit matchup dependent, but if Noah Brown is out, are these two players, Nico Collins and Tank Dell, just line up blocks just because of the fact that CJ Stroud's so good.
They are.
Like you just play them.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nico might have more targets than Tank over the last 2 weeks.
Okay, 9 to 8 yesterday for Nico versus Tank Dell. But just a great story. I will say this every single time we talk about the Texans, because we are now getting to the point where the draft is right around the corner, relatively speaking, right? And if you're a Patriots fan, you're a Cardinals fan, you're a sorry, Panthers fans, not a Panthers fan, you're a Bears fan. But the Bears, I think, have some promise already. But if you're one of those teams, I'm like, we all lived through that Patriots-Giants game yesterday. Like, as bad as it is, you're one draft away from turning your franchise around. Yeah. You are one C.J. Stroud away. They don't grow on trees. I get it. C.J. is special. But just think about how bad the Texans were for the past, like, half decade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's why right you don't accept mediocrity at quarterback. And that's why I've been like, the Giants need to take a quarterback if they can. I mean, I don't care. Yeah. If you're not sure you have a franchise quarterback, you need to be looking at quarterback.
Are you calling Tommy DeVito not a franchise quarterback? Don't answer that. 2 thoughts here. 2 tight end thoughts quickly. Dalton Schultz needs to not play the Jaguars in the games against.
Actually, I have some commentary there. You can't start him this week. We have a big problem here. He ran a route in 16 of their first 23 Houston pass plays. 0 of the final 14. It was all Brevin Jordan. Brevin Jordan came off IR and stole his workload throughout chunks of that game, especially in the fourth quarter.
Okay, I have a funny story that I can't tell on the air after this, but I'll tell you that in a little bit on Dalton Schultz. Okay, so let's vet that out more.
Do you disagree, though? I mean,
I did not realize that.
That's a big. I mean, he had a terrible day, and there's a reason for it. He wasn't on the field.
That's great. I did not realize that.
Yeah, so I'm good. And by all accounts, it's not injury related. So I'm really worried about that.
I want to do this right now. I'm sending a prayer right now. Did you know that Evan Ingram is now pacing to shatter Deontay Johnson's record of most catches in a season without a touchdown?
Oh, no way. Is he
over 100?
Wow, I didn't realize he was on that pace.
Deontay was at 85 last year. We got to go in a second here, Pulse, but Deontay Johnson could become the man who's now in second place behind Dalton Schultz.
Way.
More thoughts in just a moment. We talk Bijan. All right, back here on Fantasy Focus, Field Yates, Mike Clay with our guy Kevin Pulsifer in tow as well, recapping Week 12 of the NFL regular season. Bijan Robinson was awesome yesterday, Mike. Was this the unleashing? And I feel a little bit guilty asking that question because I think pretty much what happens is every time Bijan goes off, we go, is this the unleashing of Bijan Robinson? What did you make of yesterday's unbelievable performance, 27.3 fantasy points?
I think we got Arthur Smith to change his ways.
He did.
I think we successfully pulled it off. He might not care about fantasy, but it was enough that he was like, we need to get this guy at the ball more. And it has happened over the last 2 weeks since all that started. His touches, his touch lines, 23 for 106 and a touchdown, 19 for 123 and 2 touchdowns. His first top 12 fantasy week since week 4. And now, plays the Jets, 5th most fantasy points to running backs. Very good against the pass.
Throwing them,
not as much against the run. So, Bijan is very much back in the fringe top 10 conversation, and he was performing well below that mark for a while.
We care more about like true goal to go situations, like 3-yard line and in, but they had 2 snaps inside the 10-yard line yesterday to the Falcons. Both of them went to Bijan, which
that's a big change.
That's better than Tyler Algier, right? Better than him having 0 of those 2.
Yeah, by the way, I will say this. Cordero Patterson played a lot in this game, especially as a runner, and Algier didn't disappear. So they are using 3 guys still. We're not going to rank Bijan as a top 5 running back or anything like that, but certainly feel a lot better than we did 3 weeks ago.
I have such a soft spot in my heart for Patterson that it doesn't rankle me as much when he gets touches. Because like he had one of the like truck stick runs of the year yesterday, like just totally dominated like a Saints defender. That was, I think it might have been Marcus May. Apologies if it was not. Seriously, if you were the Jets though next week, they're so great against against quarterbacks and receivers. Would you actually just stack the box, like be like, go ahead, try to beat us, like? We'll put 11 players in the box.
Matchup-wise, it's not great for the Jets. They're built to stop the pass, and Falcons don't have much of a passing game.
If you're the Jets, would you flip your, like, hey, we're going to play Sauce Gardner at nose tackle next week and just see what happens,
well, let's not do that.
Okay.
It seems like, but certainly less nickel for sure. We'll see less Michael Carter. Got to try heavier packages.
All right, let's talk about the Bengals offense. As we saw the first version of them for a full game without Joe Burrow. It was Jake Browning under center. I did not know this until Chad Minutilla, who's one of the best producers at all of ESPN. He runs Sunday NFL Countdown, passed this note along to me. Jake Browning had one of the single greatest high school seasons in the history of high school football. He grew up in California. How many passing touchdowns do you think Jake Browning had during his senior year?
In his senior year, so that's going to be
games?
like 12 games?
Yeah.
60.
91.
What? That's not real. What?
It's real. Yes.
91 touchdowns.
Yes.
Oh my God.
He did not have 91 yesterday, Mike. He had a total of 1 touchdown yesterday. But what'd you make of what you saw from Ja'Marr Chase? Would you say that you feel about how you felt coming into the week? Because I do.
Yeah, because that touchdown, I mean, it must have gone to Ja'Marr Chase, right?
Well,
it definitely
Mixon,
go to Drew Sample.
Oh, former second-round pick. You know what, though?
The third-string tight end these days for them.
However, college teammate of Jake Browning's in Washington.
Oh, could be something there, right? Yeah. Although they like Tanner Hudson now. He's a double-digit target share 3 straight games for some reason.
But he only plays like 30 snaps a game.
That's right.
But they throw him the ball all the time.
Yeah, it's bizarre. But anyway, I'm worried about Ja'Marr Chase. I think I'm going to rank him lower for sure, maybe around 10th or 12th range this week. 30th or worse in fantasy points at wide receiver 3 of the last 4 weeks. And here's the concerning part. 6 to 8 targets in all 4 of those games, including only 6 targets this past game. Now, they did only run 41 snaps, that's like second percentile of the league this season. It's a super low number. I think 38 is the fewest we've seen in a game, and that was one of the worst we've seen in the past decade. So that won't always be the case, but this is a trend now for a month, and it's not Joe Burrow anymore. Yeah. So I'm definitely a little bit more worried about Chase. So you're going to start him, but I'm not going to rank him nearly as high.
Yeah, so I had been my mind was closer to wide receiver 20 coming into the week, and that's kind of where I feel like
20,
yeah.
Wow,
I mean, you just gave the damning numbers right there. I'll add a few more to them. You mentioned they ran 41 plays. They had 1 drive over 5 plays yesterday.
Yeah, that's not good.
Chase had 4 catches yesterday. 2 of them were on deflections. That's crazy. Just look at the offense and ask yourself if it's going to get a whole lot better. Yes, the Steelers are definitely a very good defense, but are the Jaguars a pushover?
No,
they're not a great defense, but they're a pushover defense as well. They play next Monday night. 2 things that I think are possible. I think it's possible the Bengals claim Will Grier off of waivers today.
Okay.
Is it possible that Jake Browning is replaced at some point?
Absolutely. Okay. If they have another guy anyone could be replaced.
We thought McCarron?
Maybe. I don't know.
It's too frisky for you. Okay.
Yeah, look, if Browning's struggling, they're going to try something else. I mean, I think the Jets are kind of the extreme example of that, where they were like, look, there's no way Tim Boyle's better than Zach Wilson, but Zach Wilson was playing so poorly, they were like, we don't have a choice.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got to mix it up for the sake of mixing it up. I truthfully, not that he was much better in relief yesterday, but if you're the Patriots at some point, how can you tell the locker room we're going back to Mac Jones every single game?
No.
Right? Even if Bailey Zappi can't hit the broadside of a barn in practice, change the vibe ups like the Jets did. Right. Maybe the Bengals will at some point.
Browns as well, same kind of thing.
Yeah,
2 quarterbacks playing atrociously, but they have
Flacco time this weekend.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to do that. You have to get somebody to just manage the game.
Yes,
I mean,
totally.
You have to do something like that.
Last thing, though, on the Bengals, you were probably pleased by the fact that they were still pretty pass heavy. That's what they have always been.
Yeah.
But they can't run the ball. 8 rushes for 16 yards for Joe Mixon last night.
Yeah, not great. They did not flip to a super run-heavy attack by any means. But again, it was such a small sample of plays that we don't want to get too carried away, but they still threw the ball a lot. By the way, I wanted to throw this in on Chase. Maybe you're right. More like Garrett Wilson now.
That's fair.
He's not going to score probably, and they're going to struggle to move the ball, but he's just going to see a big target share, and that's enough to keep him in that weekly wide receiver 1 conversation.
Let's talk about a couple players that used to be in the weekly wide receiver 1 conversation. They are no longer there. But the Rams, back on track. They are now 5-6, Mike, very much in the NFC playoff picture.
Yeah.
And Kyren Williams was well rested yesterday, and he went off. Congratulations. If you have Kyren Williams in your league, you, my friends, have won yesterday because he was unbelievable, Mike. The highest scoring running back in all of fantasy for the week, 16 carries for 143 yards, 6 catches on 6 targets for 61 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Unbelievable effort from Kyren Williams. You and I think we're on the same page about Kyren coming off of injured reserve. It was that he's going to handle the most rushing attempts for the Rams. But one thing was very clear prior to when he got hurt. His targets were starting to go down. Apparently, Sean McVay was like, you know what? Early season Kyren is what we want because he was outstanding as a runner and receiver yesterday.
Yeah, 6 targets, caught them all for 61 yards, and actually both touchdowns were receiving touchdowns in that game. So, I remember it was a small sample at the beginning of the year. Ton of targets, and then they disappeared, and now they seem to be back. Also, Royce Freeman's the other running back, so he has 1 target this season. Yeah. So if they're going to throw the ball to a running back, it's going to be Kyren Williams. 4 games with 2 touchdowns this season so far. He's been really good. Also, believe it or not, only 1 running back is averaging more fantasy points per game this season.
Christian McCaffrey?
It's Christian McCaffrey.
Kyren
Aaron is second in that category. He's been really good. I mean, man, he was so good in college. I loved him, and then he got to the combine and was so slow, and that like his speed score was so poor that like no one ever works out, like no one ever pans out with that speed score.
Yeah.
And it seems like someone's going to pan out with that speed score. He looks like the real deal.
Awesome. Going to be a lock every single week. Let's spend the rest of the time we have in this segment talking about Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. Let's start here, Mike. I want to start with Cooper Kupp because Cooper Kupp is a player that we have all revered for multiple seasons now. He was the best player in fantasy 2 years ago. He was incredible last year prior to getting hurt. 3 catches, 18 yards, 5 targets yesterday. He has 1 game with a touchdown this season. He has under 7 fantasy points in 5 straight games. Yes, of course, multiple games without 1 game without Matthew Stafford.
1 game he left hurt.
Yeah,
right.
The eye test is not good right now for Cooper Kupp. Looks slow. Looks not nearly as springy and athletic. And by the way, I know he was on the injury report, but he was a full go. He was off the game status report by Friday. Like, I don't think this is simply the health report. Can he bounce back? Or right now, are there any signs that suggest he can?
No, I'm very much concerned here. 148 yards in that big week 6 game where we thought, all right, he's back. We're good to go. Since that point, 127 yards on 30 targets in 5 games. So
that's absurd.
The good news is the targets are pretty much still there, not quite to the extent we want them, but enough to be a fantasy starter. But the bad news is the production hasn't followed. And also this week specifically, playing the Browns.
Yes, they sure
Fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. A big problem for Kupp. I'll still rank him in the 20s, startable, for 6 teams on a bye.
Yep.
But very much worried. And also worried about Puka Nacua.
Puka Nacua, no doubt. He scored 1 since week 5. And while his targets are still pretty good, he got 7+ targets in every game this season. Like, the production has just dropped off dramatically. 4 catches for 27 yards. The beginning of the year, he was unbelievable. I get it. I'm not taking anything away from Puka Nacua. But remember, also, he'd also have like 15 catches for like, 135 yards, right? So like he needs elite volume to be a lock-it-in wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I will say this in his defense, whereas Cooper Kupp hasn't had a good game in a long time.
Yeah.
Nacua did have 5 for 70 and a touchdown in week 11.
Sure.
So that was recently.
No,
also, Nacua has at least 6 targets in every game this season, with or without Kupp, 6+ targets in every game. So this is a tough matchup. I feel like maybe his floor is a little higher than Kupp right now, just based on what we've seen
I would totally
as of
agree,
late.
yeah.
But you could certainly make the case he's the better fantasy option at this point.
There's whenever you have a slumping star, the hope is always the same for me, is that like you just tell yourself that this is this weird, funny, unpredictable game, and it just takes one outing for things to get back on track. It's just tough. Like, you watch the Rams closely. It just doesn't feel like they're nearly as concentrated on Cooper Kupp. And the numbers are what they are right now. You just look at him, it doesn't look the same to me. It's tough. A player that was so good, the Super Bowl MVP 2 years ago. Things happen fast. This is why Mike always retires guys age-wise by like 20
That's what I was
years old.
just thinking about. Is that catching up with them? They came out fresh, but now it's starting to catch up with them a little bit. We're seeing that, with maybe Adam Thielen as well, like DeAndre Hopkins. Like maybe could be that.
Not many points for Cooper Kupp, but plenty for the Eagles and the Bills in just a moment. All right, back here on Fantasy Focus, Field Yates and Mike Clay wrapping up Week 12 and Game of the Year. Maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, you're an Eagles fan, so
I'm very biased, but that was suspenseful.
I mean, just an unbelievable game. One of those games went to overtime, 37-34. The Eagles, the grittiest team in football right now by, the best record in the NFL right now by 2 full games, by the way, as well. They improved to 10-1. And how about this, Mike? For the first time ever, the opposing quarterbacks within the same game each had at least 2 passing touchdowns and each had at least 2 rushing touchdowns.
That never happened before?
Never.
Wow.
Josh Allen had over 400 yards of total offense. He led the Bills in both rushing and, of course, passing. He had 420 yards of total offense and 4 touchdowns. Highest scoring player in all of fantasy this week. Meanwhile, Jalen Hurts had 265. He was a slouch. Only 265 total yards. 5 touchdowns accounted for Jalen Hurts. 3 through the air, 2 on the ground, Mike. Unbelievable game. And, that's the kind of game where you just marvel at it. You just, whatever, right? Like, these guys are awesome. Like, you win your week because of these 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And the thing is, the Eagles did nothing in the first half. Again, just like last week. I don't know what they're doing at halftime.
The hilarious tweets I saw. He was 2 for 9 was Jalen Hurts to begin the game.
Yeah, this is 2 weeks in a row. Yeah. They were terrible in the first half. And then, remember, there's the Chiefs 2 weeks ago. Yep. Down, I believe they were down 10 both weeks. Yep. They came back and won both games. And this was they were unstoppable. They couldn't move the ball at all. And I don't know what it is about their offense right now, but it's just like, we're just going to force runs and bubble screens forever. And we'll just do it until the fans are furious. and then just throw it deep down, and it works every time.
No, I'm telling you, the turning point yesterday was when they tried to screen to Julio Jones, and Twitter lost it. Apoplectic.
But same thing happened against the Chiefs. They did 3 bubble screens in a row against the Chiefs.
Yeah. And then everything got better. It's like they need to hit rock bottom before they can kind of wake up, and it happened.
But they are
just in the nick of the time because they are so gritty. And Devonta Smith, Mike, has been in fuego of late. Another game, over 100 receiving yards, 7 catches for a touchdown. This kind of happened around after week 1 last year, but like for a player this talented, in an offense this good, with a quarterback this good, like just a reminder, like it can happen at any time. And like if he for the rest of the season outscores AJ Brown, not a crazy idea at all.
No, not at all.
On it, but it's not a crazy idea at all.
No, it's not. And you look at his last 4 games: 7 for 99 and a touchdown, 3 for 51 and a touchdown, 6 for 99 and 7 for a $106 and a touchdown.
Pretty good.
He's back. He was very up and down to start the season. Definitely underwhelming. The target's still down a little from last year, but I would say he's back now. At 49ers this week, you could throw on them a little bit. So, yeah, must start for sure.
You have something there, Pauls?
Yeah, you can call me just Mr. Player Availability on this, I guess, because without Dallas Goedert, 7 games in the last 2 seasons, 8 targets in every single game for Devonta Smith, 16.9 fantasy points per game, more fantasy points, more targets, and more catches than AJ Brown. And like you said, we saw it from week 2 on last year, more targets and more catches. So he's a 1A, 1B, I think, when Goddard's not there.
I looked at this yesterday. The Eagles changed their offensive scheme without Dallas Goedert. They had 24% of their offensive snaps were run without a tight end on the field, which the NFL average in that department is 2%. I mean, that's unheard of. The Eagles don't do that at all.
Yeah.
But yesterday they were like, actually, Sal Pal, remember he said the Eagles should make Julio Jones their tight end?
Yeah.
They essentially did that. Where they used him, Quez Watkins, Olamide Zaccheaus caught a touchdown.
Right.
They just were like, you know what? We don't have a tight end we like. We're just going with 4 wide.
I was imagining Julio getting a 3-point stance like next to Jordan Mailata, down there with combo blocking here.
But
who's blocking? Who's blocking? I don't know, whatever, Shaq Lawson or something. Anyways. On the Bills side, Mike, Allen, unbelievable, just incredible. 39.66 fantasy points, just monster day. James Cook, though, 16 fantasy points. Toughest matchup as there is for a running back. And I'll say this, it could have been better. I would say more than anything else, the part that seems to have changed a little bit over the past weeks is they're more creative with James Cook in the passing game.
They're more creative. What's funny about this is he's had 2 of his best games of the season over the last 2 weeks of his career.
Yeah.
He got benched in both of them for long spans because of mistakes. He had a drop yesterday, and last week it was the fumble. But 20 and 22 touches the last 2 weeks.
A ball right through the wickets, like a long throw down the sideline. I think it was Nicholas Morrow in coverage.
Yeah, but in the Bills' defense, though, they're like, he's made some mistakes. We're going to sit him down for a little bit, but he's too good to keep off the field, and he continues to deliver. Only outsnapped Murray by 1 snap in this game. Ty Johnson also played 10 snaps and is getting involved. But Cook, they're going on a bye right now. When he comes back, obviously a lineup play.
God, that's a tough bye to have in week 13. The Bills, just so much fantasy potency on that team.
Seriously.
Including Gabe Davis. And he had a big day yesterday, Mike. 6 catches, 105 yards, touchdown, and 12 targets. I want to give a shout out to our friend Nick Menzio. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you should go find him.
Of course, yeah.
He has his own spot now that he's blogging on about fantasy content and worth your time and money if you were inclined to buy some good content. And he was like, he put a long shot bet on Gabe Davis to lead the NFL in receiving yards for week 12. Now, he didn't quite make it Gabe Davis, but it was like the right process here, right?
Yeah.
It's the best matchup you can get. And, teams are probably going to always allocate more opportunity to Stephon Diggs. And Gabe Davis, had been sort of, but with Gabe Davis, he's almost kind of due every once in a while. Big day, but this is why he is not actually, but he is ceremonially a 49er.
Yeah, he is. That was too bad, too, because they went to overtime. I think they ran 92 offensive plays, did the Bills?
Yeah.
Which is an unheard of, ridiculous number. But I will say this about Gabe Davis, 6 for 105 and a touchdown and 12 targets in that game.
Yep.
His prior 3 weeks combined 9 targets, 2 catches, 56 yards, and no touchdowns. We've had this conversation before. I don't know if he fits 49er designation. I don't feel good starting him because the duds are bad and they come often.
If there was a Madden cover for best ball, Gabe Davis would be our cover boy.
Yeah.
4 games with 21 plus fantasy
DFS
points.
tournament play.
Third most amongst all receivers. Only Tyreek Hill and Keenan Allen have more.
Rough.
Come back with more thoughts, including Jakobi Meyers in just a moment. All right, back here on Fantasy Focus, Field Yates and Mike Clay recapping Week 12. And Mike, Liz Loza gets shout-outs here because she gets her flowers, not Zay. We'll talk about him in just a moment here. But on a day in which the Raiders actually came out of the gates hot, Jakobi Meyers was the best receiver on the field for either team. 7 catches, 7 targets, 6 catches, 79 yards, and a touchdown. He had kind of been irrelevant over the past month or so for the Raiders, but capitalizing on a good matchup with L'Jarius Sneed paying lots of attention to Devontae Adams.
Yep, wrote the same thing. We're on the same page, me and Liz. Wrote that up in the Shadow Report as well. That's the spot we've been picking on this season. Opposite, Sneed's shadowed in 10 straight games. When he's on the one, the other side opens up, and was Meyers in this game. So no doubt about it. I'm going to credit this to the matchup because he hasn't been good with AOC prior this season. 4.6 targets per game, 7 this week was his highest with O'Connell under center. So yeah, I'm not going to go. I don't feel great starting him right now. I'd say maybe again, they go to a bye when they come back. Flex option in 12-team leagues. One game's just not going to do it with the matchup situation. This one.
And I don't know if they play in Week 14, but I don't think that it'll be L'Jarius Sneed shadowing Devontae Adams because they do not play the Chiefs again until Week 18. They're at the end of the game. You see what happened at the end of the game? They try to run like one of those crazy like pitchy woo woo plays. And at one point they threw the ball to Jakobi Meyers, and he gets the ball and he just like. He cranks up as if he's going to throw it across the field. And I was like, don't do it, Jakobi. I don't care like what the opportunity is. Like I was just thinking about that play last year where he was with the Patriots and did it on that field, threw the ball backwards. Unbelievable.
But honestly, if there were no quarterbacks in the whole league, they all just retired today, and you had to do a draft of skill players to play quarterback, he'd be first pick? He'd be up there.
Taysom.
Johnny Hecker.
Taysom, good call.
Good call. Johnny Hecker also throws just darts.
Yeah.
I think he's like 7 for 7.
Jacoby's
way up there.
He always gets some plays carved.
He does.
McDaniels with him in New England, he always had 1 or 2 pass attempts per year.
I actually saw Derrick Henry, great short yardage thrower. Deebo Samuel, I think, did this, and I was really encouraged by it. I hate when receivers who take the ball like on a reverse and then are going to throw it. When they're like, the pressure from the defensive back or linebacker comes up, and like rather than throwing the ball away,
just run out of bounds.
Like for like a 3-yard loss, when it's like all you got to do is just like throw it 5 yards because there's no intentional grounding ramifications there. And Deebo actually did it. I was proud of him.
That's big.
Good football instincts right there. I was trying to think of an analog for Michael Pittman Jr. Mike. He's as steady as there is in fantasy this season. He had 13 targets, another 10-plus catches, 107 yards, so 20.7 fantasy points for Michael Pittman Jr. He hardly scores touchdowns, Mike, and yet he's still an unbelievable fantasy weapon.
Yes, zero weekly finishes better than 9th, so he hasn't had that high ceiling. He's not going to come out and get you 32 points, but
what's his floor?
His floor is outstanding. He's been top 25 8 times.
It's crazy.
And when you get this much volume, and especially the high percentage throws in the short area, which is what they build up for him, a big target share with a lot of short and intermediate targets, it's going to work out for you. And he plays Tennessee this week. About the 6th most fantasy points to receivers this season. So he should be able to keep it going. Minshew and him just have a good connection.
A couple thoughts here is there a more underappreciated player in fantasy right now than Michael Pittman Jr.?
Not really. I don't think so. I underappreciated him all offseason. Of course, I thought Anthony Richardson would be the quarterback, but nonetheless, they've done an exceptional job just scheming for him.
They have.
Just to say, this is a guy we have to get the ball to. We can't succumb to some of these other offenses where it's a low volume offense and our top guys don't get the ball. Like they built this offense around him in a big way, and it's worked out great.
I don't, and probably will never vote for NFL Coach of the Year, but it would be the hardest award in some ways to pick because I think there's like 8 quality candidates in a lot of seasons, one of which is Shane Steichen. But how about some further numbers on Michael Pittman this season? He has 7 games with at least 11 targets. That's tied for the most in the NFL. He has 8 games with at least 8 catches, tied for the most in the NFL. He has 10 games with 10 or more fantasy points. Only Tyreek Hill has more in the entire NFL amongst wide receivers. So if you're looking for a high floor, Michael Pittman Jr. is that. And he's had some, our buddy Denny Carter has written about how he's had bad luck in the end zone so far this year. And like maybe that'll eventually even out. It didn't happen yesterday, but Pittman, the kind of guys kind of do. He's due for something. It's a positive regression.
Maybe like throughout Keenan Allen's career, right in the middle, the middle, is not as when he's down, not when he's up like he is this year, but like just your normal standard Keenan Allen from the last 5-7 years. That's where Michael Pittman is right now.
Toto, did you have a thought there?
I was about to call him Keenan Allen.
Yeah.
He's only got 6 catches, more than 15 yards downfield, which is 55th in the NFL, less than Demario Douglas, less than Noah Brown.
Doesn't bother me a bit.
Less than Josh Palmer in half the season.
It's working.
But that's exactly what you're getting out of him. Go with it.
By the way, Josh Downs was back to being a full-time player yesterday.
Oh yeah, he was. He had. We talked about a great matchup, and he was right there with Pittman in target. So he's good to go. You're starting.
But
with
I just wanted to make sure people knew that coming off of the knee knee injury, like was it going to linger? It did not. He was a full-time player yesterday. He had 5 catches, 43 yards for Josh Downs. Sunday Night Football, Ravens, Chargers. Ravens win this one. They improve to 8-3, 9-3, excuse me, because they have their bye week this week. So for now, they are the number 1 seed in the AFC, just ahead of the Chiefs and the Dolphins and the Jaguars. So 4 teams with just 3 losses in the conference. 2010 is a final, a late game. Zay Flowers touchdown puts it away, Mike. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But Lamar Jackson. Frustrating? Disappointing?
Yeah, he would.
Season, right?
Yeah, he's the guy. I feel like he's the guy that's like the frustrating fantasy quarterback this year. It's just like he's like flashing here or there, but it's just not really happening. I mean, he's 9th in points per game at quarterback. Yep. He's been outside the top 12 4 of the last 5 weeks. So too good to bench, but you're not really getting out of him what you want. Actually, I guess Mahomes probably leads that list, but Lamar's right there.
Yep. 1 or fewer touchdown in 4 of his past 5 games. Total, not rushing or passing, 1 or fewer total touchdowns in 4 of his past 5 games, Mike. And remember, this offseason, we spent the entire year talking about how like this Ravens offense is going to thrive and be different and take off with Greg Roman gone. And now we have, of course, Todd Monken under, or I guess I was going to say under center. He's not under center, calling the plays. I don't know where they rank in terms of points per game this year as opposed to last year. They're 9-3, so the vibes are high. I'm not trying to call out Todd Monken.
Defense, but rushing it. Yeah,
this is not a reformed offense from what I watch every single week at all.
No,
at all, right?
No, I mean I don't know much else to add. I mean they are winning games. They're doing it with defense. They don't need, they're not generally in positions where they're trailing and need a lot of offense. Yeah. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe it'll be like maybe we'll see that in the playoffs or something. But the one thing I'll say though is I thought the defense would take a step back against actual good quarterbacks, which they did not play in the first 8-10 games of the season, and that hasn't been the case. And if they keep shutting down opposing offenses, they're just not going to be in comeback mode or close late close games, and Lamar's not going to have to put up big passing numbers. So actually, who had more passing yards in this game? Was it Herbert, or that was one of our red zone questions?
It was Herbert. 217 to 177. So you got that one right. Herbert had a quiet day. We'll talk about that in a second. The star of fantasy though for Lamar, it's that bind though, right? It's the good enough to or too good to bench, but not good enough to win you your league.
Yeah, not right now.
Not right now. He has not been that. And is there any reason to believe that this is going to change after the bye?
No, I mean, their schedule, again, is much tougher in the second half of the season, which it hasn't affected the defense, but it has affected Lamar.
Yeah,
he's just not producing lately. But again, I agree. You're still starting him.
Yeah. Let's talk about Zay Flowers, though, Mike, because it was an awesome game. It was a breakout game in terms of fantasy points, but in terms of utilization, was it? He had 2 touchdowns last night, 1 prior to that going into the game for the entire season. He finished with 8 targets and then that 1 carry at the end of the game in which he scored. Awesome play. He had 2 great celebrations last night, by the way. 2 great ones. First, he had the proposal. Then he had the penalty kick in soccer. He and OBJ collaborated on that one. Yeah. Is this the breakout moment here for Zay Flowers, or still some concerns?
No, I don't think it's his first top 25 and his first game over 6 targets since week 6. Yeah. That's a long time ago. This was week 12. So no, I'm not going that far. I still think they're going to continue to utilize multiple guys. And also they did get Isaiah Likely involved in this game. I believe it's 6 targets in this game. So they're going to use Flowers. They're going to use Likely. They're going to use OBJ, who his target, he was still 4th in line in snaps at wide receiver, but still at a decent target share. Rashad Bateman's not going away, and Nelson Aguilar gets some run as well. So not to mention that, again, it's not like Lamar's lighting it up with passing touchdowns. So no, I think Flowers is a guy they're going to buy. I think when they come out of it, will rank as a wide receiver 3. Yeah.
He has upside because he's a really talented player, right? And like he doesn't need a ton of opportunities to score.
He hasn't had upside this year.
Right.
I mean,
he has not
fantasy upside. I think he's just his floor is okay because he's gonna get 5-6 targets and a carry, and the offense is good overall. Yep. But again, it just if they stop handing it to Gus Edwards at the goal line, we'll be fine. We just need more passing touchdowns.
He hasn't had more than 75 yards in a game since week 1.
Flowers. Exactly. He hasn't matched his usage and production since week 1.
So good to see. And I thought Isaiah Likely last night was in between what we've seen over the past 2 years,
which is fine with me. I mean, he'll be a fringe. I think I'll say they're on a bye. They come off the bye. I'll rank him 14th.
Okay.
That's tight end, something like that.
I was going to think 10 to 12, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, somewhere in that range.
Yep, makes
fine,
sense for Isaiah Likely. Let's talk Chargers in this game, Mike.
By the way, one more. Keaton Mitchell, career high snap share.
Led the team in snaps last night.
He sure did. Just keep an eye on him. Keep him roster, deep league flex, make some big plays.
It's just going to be hard if he's still at like 36%. of snaps.
He was 47 in this one, yeah.
Oh, yeah, and then Gus Edwards gets the goal line carries. It's like, so what's the path to him, like, seizing that job?
Might be injury,
remember, it won't be, it's week 14 when they next play. So you're talking about, like, he's going to have to earn the job in week 14. Then it's week 15, you're in the playoffs. Like, so we'll see. It's going to take some things to happen before he becomes, like, a stone-cold starter. But interesting name for 2024 at the very least. At the very least.
Yeah,
right?
I agree. And he should be on benches. We had this conversation because I had a decision yesterday. I had to activate Kyren Williams from IR.
Yeah.
And I was debating, should I keep Keaton Mitchell? Should I drop someone like Chuba Hubbard, who's a starter technically?
Yeah.
And like, it really was an easy call. It's like, if Gus Edwards gets hurt or something, or Keaton Mitchell does play 60 to 70% of the snaps in this offense, like league winning potential. Chuba Hubbard does not have league winning potential in this Carolina offense. What do you have? One touch? I mean, he wasn't that good. He split
20 plus fantasy.
He got out
points
carried by Miles Sanders. I think.
But it's like 20 plus fantasy points, right? But that's
I know it's fine. I mean, it was Chuba or Khalil Herbert or Kyren Williams. I went Kyren Williams. Like, I'm happy with that.
Totally.
I hear you. But in a bad offense, splitting with Miles Sanders, like no regrets.
It's just funny that we torture ourselves.
I know. I hear you.
So for the Chargers, they met their match with that Ravens defense, right? The Ravens defense is just outstanding. They are just ridiculous. They have, I think, the fourth lowest yards allowed per drop back in like the past 25 years. Like, just ridiculous right now. Under 4.5 yards per drop back allowed. And of course, only one quarterback has reached 20 fantasy points at the game against the Ravens this season. So Herbert having a relatively quiet night, not a total shocker there. He had nearly 50 rushing yards though, and he had nearly 50 passing attempts. So you'd probably live with that.
Yeah. When we're talking about Mahomes and Lamar disappointing, I mean, Herbert is not disappointed. He's been terrific prior to this game, which again, terrible matchup. If you don't watch the Chargers and you just caught this game on primetime, you're probably like, oh man, he's kind of stinking. No, it was the matchup. I mean, he was a top 3 scorer at quarterback. The prior 3 weeks, he's been top 10 8 times in 11 games. So he has been solid, and he's had upside. He's everything you want in a fantasy quarterback, frankly.
Let's wrap up here with Austin Ekeler, Mike. And we can have, and by the way, Keenan Allen went nuts again. 14 catches for 106 yards.
So slow start too. And then
yards per catch, not great, but when you get 14 of them, don't care. Austin Ekeler, Mike. So interesting offseason for Austin. He requests the trade. He ends up not getting traded. Instead gets this amended contract. It has up to, I think, $2 million in incentives, but he basically had to be the player he was last year, plus a little more. He has been far from that. We were having this conversation about Cooper Kupp. Like, when you watch him, you just see something different. Does that apply in your eyes to Austin Ekeler?
I think he'll be okay.
It applies to me.
This was another tough matchup against Baltimore. I know he did have a dud last week against the Packers as well. However, 21 plus fantasy points in 3 straight prior to these last 2 down games. 67% of the carries he's handling this season. That is a career high. The problem here is, and it's a minor problem because it's not a big change, but 5.5 targets is his lowest per game since 2018. It's down about a target per game. Yeah. So that
matters to me.
They play New England this week, mid-range matchup. Not super worried. I mean, I think I'm still going to rank him probably top 5 this week.
Yeah. So I think it's a little bit less about like where you're going to rank him and a little bit more about sort of what we talked about with Lamar Jackson. Is the idea is that like when you have these players in your lineup, you immediately identify them and say like, that's my edge every week.
Yeah.
Right. And Ekeler over the past 2 weeks and in other parts of this season as well has not been as much of an edge as he was for the past 2 seasons, right?
Yeah, not quite as, I mean, compared to leading the NFL in touchdowns by like, 9 touchdowns or something over the last 2 years.
We took him second overall in a lot of leagues, right? Like, he was second, third, maybe fourth. Like, I just, it has been a little bit of a tougher go than I think any of us could have anticipated for Austin Ekeler.
Yeah, I'm with you. We're not used to duds like this 2 weeks in a row. Yeah. I mean, but at least he did have those 3 straight with 20-plus points. Also had the big week 1. So, for the most part, he's been good. But he has, again, here's the thing. If he comes out this week and has a big game, we're going to be like, we're going to forget about it. It's fine.
No, we will, of course.
Yeah. If he has another down game like this, though, then I think it's a longer conversation.
And, of course, part of the conversation is that, like, so few running backs have been great this year. Right? I mean, Christian McCaffrey's been next level, right? But, like, even, like, the luster has come off the Travis Etienne over the past month, right? like, he's been a little less efficient, which was bound to happen when he scored 7 touchdowns in 4 games, right?
I mean, that's why I never feel good about running backs at all.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just worried. You're always worried the wheels are going to fall off. It's just the nature of the position. Even like Kyren was so scary beginning in the year when he was doing so well. You're like, just please hold up. And he didn't. Yeah. But then he comes back and he's great again. So it's been tough. But by the way, that's the difference between like Ekeler and Lamar Jackson, your comp, because like we only need 10 or 12 quarterbacks. We need two running backs, 24 running backs, plus a flex. You're starting, 30 running backs in the league. Ekeler still feels like a pretty secure starter, lineup lock.
He's definitely starting.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I just feel like it's been. I think there are people out there right now that are probably like, I really wish I had just taken CMC.
Yeah, I mean,
or definitely. A tight end, or whatever, or Kelsey, or a top flight wide receiver.
Yeah.
Pulse, what do you got?
One thing just to wrap up that Ekeler conversation: the Chargers' playoff schedule for the fantasy playoffs. Raiders, Broncos, and Bills. They're all bottom 10 in fantasy points allowed to running backs. So
maybe better days are ahead of you for.
I mean, not that you were going to bench him in the fantasy playoffs anyways, but
right, so
you at least have
weeks
a little
that
bit
I
more
was concerned about maybe are coming, and I'm just.
Hope so. I mean, I'm the nervous. He's played
right
what?
Now.
He's played 5-6 games this year. Yep. He's like 4 boom games.
Yeah,
like he's a couple duds. He's
8 games, 4 over 20 fantasy points, and the other 4 were all 10 or lower.
Okay, so did he? One of them injured? I don't know. Anyway, all right, fair enough. He
was so Mr. Consistency for the past 2 years that it's just like it's jarring when it's not.
Yeah, I guess when he came back, wasn't great, and then fair enough. Okay.
All right, that'll do it for most of our Week 12 thoughts here as we spin forward to things in just a moment here on Fantasy Focus. More thoughts here on Monday Night Football. All right, Field Yates, Mike Clay, preview Monday Night Football in a jiffy here, Mike. We do not expect Justin Jefferson to be activated from IR by 4 p.m. Eastern time.
We do not.
Just a few hours from right now. So any thoughts when I say Monday Night Football, what are you keeping your eyes on most for this game tonight?
Well, I'm in a couple leagues where, including against my dad, where he has Ty Chandler. So I need him not to have 50 points. So that's what I'm keeping an eye on. Not 50 points from Ty Chandler. Can we do that?
You're up by 50. He has Ty Chandler
left.
That's right. Okay.
Am I safe, do you think?
I don't know. PPR? Half PPR?
Yeah, it's PPR, full PPR.
Makes me a little nervous.
Might be tough. He might catch 20 balls.
Yeah, he might.
I'm keeping an eye on that backfield dynamic. I feel like Ty Chandler has flashed a little bit, but they still seem committed to Alexander Madison. Yeah. So, I'd love to see. I would love to see Jefferson activated surprisingly in play, but not going to happen.
I'm keeping my eyes on Justin Fields for 2 reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously for fantasy purposes, right? Like at his best, he is a top 5 fantasy quarterback upside, right? At his worst, it's so uneven. What a fascinating story this is, though, for the last 6 weeks of the season, 7 weeks of the season for the Bears, just because they have a very clear inside track to that number 1 overall pick. If Justin Fields balls out, the Bears either are taking Marvin Harrison Jr. and bringing him to Chicago, or they're going to turn the Carolina pick from last year into about 50 draft picks. Yeah. Because someone's going to pay the full price for Caleb Williams, Drake May, Marvin Harrison Jr., et cetera, right? Fascinating path ahead for the Chicago Bears and Justin Fields. Specific to tonight, though, that Minnesota defense, pretty stingy of late, right?
Yeah, they have been a lot better keeping them in games, and that's why they've been winning games and hanging in the playoff race. But yeah, by the way, I should have, of course, led with that. Josh Dobbs, is he the real deal? Is it, is this a product of Kevin O'Connell and his scheme that has made Kirk Cousins get to the next level and keeping this offense as one of the best and most fantasy-friendly offenses in the NFL? Yeah. Can Dobbs keep that going? And then I'm with you on the other side. Obviously, the big story there is Justin Fields, and I want to see how the backfield shakes out too. I want to see something from Rashawn Johnson. I drafted him late in a lot of leagues. Haven't seen it. They seemed kind of turned to Deontay Foreman when Herbert was out. Herbert was already taking control before his injury. I'd like to see more from Rashawn, but I think it's going to be Khalil Herbert as the lead back.
Herbert with Rashawn as the number 2. Deontay, of course, doubtful to play in this game. Can't wait for this game right here on ESPN. Should be a fun one in Chicago. For Mike, great stuff. Pulse, I'm Field Yates. We'll see you guys tomorrow on Fantasy Focus. We'll recap Monday Night Football and talk waiver wires. There are plenty of names that you need to know as you make your playoff push.
We didn't really talk about Patty Mahomes in this one. You feeling better now?
You're
worried about him.
Yeah.
A little better after that one? Slow start again?
Well, I tweeted yesterday that they had 8 straight drives that amounted to 150 total yards, and then they scored their next 4 drives.
Unreal. So they were down 14-0, and they had, I think Mahomes had fewer yards than the Raiders had points at one point.
That's interesting. So you're optimistic now going forward? Confirmed. Patrick Mahomes is good. Yeah.